this share this with Dr. Geeta and she can share it. In fact, it is there in the souvenir also. I have given this.
Yeah, that's what's been informed to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Prem.
Yeah. We will, should I go to the next session if the speaker is ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker. Can I have a slide, Anil? Her slide, yeah. The next speaker is the young and dynamic Dr. Srimati Raman. She's a consultant obstetric gynecologist at the Rangadore Memorial Hospital, Bangalore. I haven't met you, ma'am, but it's my pleasure to introduce you. She's done an MD and an FRCOG UK. She has won a ton of gold medals, prizes during her MBBS. She has been an invited speaker, moderator, and panelist in various conferences. Her priorities are in the cardiotocography, obstetric emergency training workshops. She has publications and has presented posters and pre-papers up to the international conferences. Her special interests are maternal medicine, that is medical disorders in high-risk pregnancy and advanced labor ward management, clinical governance guidelines and protocols, and she's in the medical education skills, drills, and CTGs. There's some slide after that, something after that I'm not able to see. Yeah, so looking forward to hear from you on the 6th is the new 4. With all the cricket in the season going on, let's hear how we can bring obstetrics. Over to you. She's now talking on active management. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Dr. Geeta and KVG Medical College for having given me this opportunity. I hope the slides are visible, Madam.
Yes, that is visible. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. So, as Madam said, we are in the era of 2020. So, 4 has gone away, 1s, 2s, and 4s are gone. And now is era of and maybe even 10s and 20s. If people saw the match of Jofra Archer hitting 20 runs in 2 balls. So 6 is a new 4. I think there is some disturbance. Okay. So yes, 6 is a new 4. So what do I mean by that? I hope by the end of this talk, you would all be very clear about it. So if we go back, this is what we have all been taught in the past. The dictum was that we should never let the sun set twice on a laboring woman. So this was prior to the 1950s. So they just had a cutoff for the actual duration of labor. But unfortunately, this was not going to be very effective in identifying for whom interventions need to be done. So then came the era of Friedman. I'm sure all of us, have read this, and I'm sure the postgraduates are still reading this. And as Pai sir was putting it in his graph, and he said, I'd be elaborating it. So this is the Friedman curve, which we're all aware of. So basically what he found is there was a latent phase of labor from 0 to 4 centimeters. And then the slope of the curve increases very rapidly from 4 to 10. That is when the active phase of labor happens. And then we have what is called as a deceleration phase towards the end. And basically we diagnosed arrest of labor when there was no change in cervical dilatation in 2 hours time. And what we also were told that is in an ULLEP, there should be a minimum dilatation of 1.2 centimeters per hour and 1.5 centimeters per hour. So this is what all our textbooks have been saying. But let us see what the latest evidences are. So what have been the problems with this? If you look at the Friedman's curve, this was based upon a data set of about 500 women. And in those days, it was accepted. But as more and more evidences started emerging, there were lots of disagreements to the Friedman curve. So basically, we now know that the obstetric population is very different compared to the 1950s. We see more number of women in, late 30s, 40s, and new 30. So people delivering later and later in age. The BMI, hardly we see a normal BMI patient in our clinics. All of them with that standard BMI of 30. And almost 70 to 80% at least, if not 100% of epidural in labor. Induction rates are skyrocketing, nearly 50 to 60% induction of labor, and birth rates are also increasing. So there were lots of disagreements coming up into the actual Friedman curve data. So further studies which showed that the latent phase may not be actually 1 till 4 centimeters, and there was also dispute about the existence of the deceleration phase towards the end, and also about the cutoff of at least 1 centimeter progression per hour. So all of these, this is what the Friedman said, and all of these things were disputed. So what they also felt is this could be the this could contribute to the raising cesarean section rates, because we diagnose active phase arrest when there is no progress for at least 2 hours. So this meant that the women ended up having a C-section. So labor dystocia, the diagnosis became more and more common, and it contributed to a bulk of raising C-sections. So as you can see, mainly the cause for C-section in labor was failure to progress. But later on, studies showed that if you're going to wait not for 2 hours, but maybe 4 or even 6 hours, you have great majority of women going on and delivering vaginally without any maternal or neonatal complications. So as you can see, the first stage arrest, if you take in any publication, any paper, or any sort of data set, you can see minimum is at least 50 to 30% of sections happening because of first stage arrest in labor. And if these are primary sections, then they end up having a repeat section. And as we know, sections are associated with lots of adverse maternal and neonatal outcomes. I mean, not just in that pregnancy, but even later on. Women might be finding it difficult to conceive. They might have adverse outcomes in the next pregnancies also. And of course, long-term outcomes for the neonate, for the offspring, especially if they've been delivered by C-section. As we can see, the odds ratio for various disorders are been noted to be very high. So that is when, there was lots of thinking, and they said we need to probably change our outlook. Are we actually doing disservice to the women by following the Friedman's curve? So this was Zhang in 2010, and he came up with this concept of modern labor curve. So as you can see, this is completely different compared to the Friedman curve. So this was a data set from about 60,000 patients, primarily in the United States, from 19 hospitals, and he stratified their labor progress by parity. And what did he find? He found that labor may take over 6 hours to progress from 4 to 5 centimeters, and it can take more than 3 hours to progress from 5 to 6 centimeters of dilatation. And basically what he found is both in nullips as well as in multips, the progress was very similar till they reached 6 centimeters. But after that, the multips tended to accelerate much quicker. But again, our concept of 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters as a blanket may not be good. In fact, if they are in very active labor, the progress might be even quicker in multiparous patients. This is what he found. Okay, so as you can see, this is the 95th centile. So it can take as much as 6 hours for them to make 1 centimeter difference, and 3 hours to make 1 centimeter difference, 5 to 6 centimeters. So as you can see, if you say that the latent stage is 4 centimeters and we are then, calculating their labor progress, we are then going to do a disservice to these women. So this is what he said. Transition from the latent to active phase of labor happens very much later than 4 centimeters. It can happen only at about 6 centimeters. And before that, the labor is actually very slowly progressing compared to what Friedman had described. Also, he couldn't find an actual deceleration phase. So what he felt is, if you are going to allow women to labor for a longer period of time, then we can definitely decrease the C-section rates. And also, we can then affect their, we need not affect their next deliveries because they need not have a repeat cesarean section. Also, it didn't adversely affect the maternal or the neonatal outcomes. So this is the difference. So if you want to compare and contrast, as you can see, this is the original Friedman, the sigmoidal shape. Here, this is more like an hyperbolic pattern. There is no clear inflection point, but basically they say maybe at 6 centimeters, you can see a steep increase. Okay. Also, as you can see here, there is a deceleration phase. Here, there is no deceleration phase. So this is a difference between the classic sigmoidal shape curve of the Friedman and the Zhang curve, which is a hyperbolic pattern. And basically labor, which is what we need to be keeping in mind, it progresses more slowly till they reach at least 6 centimeters. So I think you can sort of understand what I mean by 6 is a new 4. Okay, so now moving on. How is it going to get translated? So as we all know, partograph is being very common commonly used. And if you look at the original partograph, they basically started off like this, the alert line starting off at about 1 centimeter. And then they found maybe this is not good. And then the modified one came in when the alert line started off from 3 centimeters. This was the original Philpott partograph. So this is a WHO partograph, which is now commonly used everywhere. Here it starts at 4 centimeters. We have the alert line and the action line. And WHO is proposing that it is going to be very useful because especially if you're going to use it in low resource settings, we can then identify patients who may run into problems and then transport them accordingly or do interventions as per need. Now, so as we already saw, 4 is probably very early on. 6 centimeter is what we say is probably the active stage beginning. So this is why Zhang started this kind of a partograph. I know it's looking very complicated. This is like, a staircase partograph. But basically, what he says is alert line may not be needed in hospital setting because anyway the patients are being monitored. And based upon what he found in the 95th centile, these lines are being drawn. These are like exponentially increasing. Okay, it is not like an uniform straight line, but it's an exponentially increasing star lines. And basically, this because it is in the 95th centile, we would be able to identify even women who are progressing towards the 95th centile and we will not be subjecting them to unnecessary C-sections. So this is what it is doing, allowing much slower labor progression. So for example, what happens, and I mean, I will again come back to this, why it is important that, there are various lines depending upon when they have started in labor. I will come to that later. But basically, what it says is, depending upon when the woman is being admitted in labor, you start the partograph. For example, if it is a patient A, she's been admitted at 2 centimeters, then you start the partograph here. And as you know, her time to go to 6 centimeters is going to take time. So that is why this line is towards the end. Okay. So now this is a progress which we are looking at A. She's been making reasonable progress. She has not crossed the 95th centile. So you're very happy with her progress. And lo and behold, she goes up and delivers a normal, has a normal delivery at around 15 hours later. Look at B. This lady started labor at 4 centimeters. She did progress fairly till 6 centimeters. But then after that, she didn't progress much, as you can see here. So that is when you need to start intervening. And sometimes, you might have to call it a day and do a C-section after the 95th centile. And if you look at C, this is how it is. She's made fairly good progress, but then towards the end, she's got stuck. So this is sort of how we use a partograph. Though it looks very complicated, it is actually very easy to use. Okay, so as you can see the difference, I mean, just everything in here. This is a Friedman curve. This is a Zhang's. And if you look here, the partograph, which is based upon the Friedman, and this is a partograph from Zhang's. So if you see the progress of this lady in the WHO partograph, she's crossed the line, which means that you would have to probably end up delivering her. Whereas if you look here in the Zhang's partograph, she is very much within the 95th centile. So you need not subject her to any unnecessary interventions. Okay. So now, if you think that the staircase partograph will be very complicated, various modifications which have been based upon this. This is one such modification wherein the lines start when they are at 6 centimeters, and this is the alert line, and this is the action line. Okay. How does this compare? So if you look at it, this is the WHO line. Okay. And as you can see, the dotted ones are the Zhang lines. Okay. So you can see we are giving more time for the patient to actually get into labor and progress on our own before we start doing interventions. So that is the advantage of using the Zhang's partograph and the Zhang's lines. Okay. So for example, let us see. So this is the partograph which is based upon the Zhang's, which is a bit simpler compared to your staircase-like partograph. Okay. So here what you do is when the action line is crossed, similar to the WHO, you start doing interventions. You do an ARM or an oxytocin, and when you cross the decision line, you might have to call it a day and deliver her by C-section. Okay, so this is the intervention which you would be doing. But in fact, what they say is even if she's crossed the decision line, if everything is favorable, you might want to give her some more time, but that is, an individualized decision. So this is what happens. As you can see here, this lady started her progress here, and look at how a dilatation has progressed very quickly, though it is beyond the action line. It is very much within the decision line, and she ended up progressing and having a normal delivery. Okay. So if you look here, this lady, what has happened? She started off here, and the initial labor progress itself is tardy. So you start doing augmentation with amniotomy, oxytocin as per need, and then look at how the progress is. Now the progress seemed to be a bit slow, but then as you can see, before the decision line, she has progressed to full dilatation and she has delivered. So if we had not given her this time, she would have ended up having a section somewhere here. Okay. But here, of course, not all of them are going to end up delivering vaginally. For this lady, despite the interventions, she crossed the decision line, so she ended up needing a section. So these are examples of how you can use a partogram. Okay. So now, obviously, the question arises: is it going to be better than the WHO partograph? This was a big study done in Norway, the lab study, and what they found is the section rates were not very statistically significant when they use a WHO partogram or the Zanz partogram. But what we need to remember is, look at their section rates. They had a intrapartum section rate of less than 10%. Are we having that in reality? No. So probably that is why the comparison didn't show any major difference, because overall the section rates was very less. And when they started doing the study, the section rates in general fell from 9 to around 6%. Okay, this may not be realistically possible in all settings. But one important take home from this study was that if we use the Zanz partogram, lesser and lesser women were augmented with oxytocin. So which I know it's very important, because oxytocin is both a bane and a boon. So we need to be very careful in women, in which women you're using oxytocin. So if you're going to use a Zanz partogram, your interventions are going to come, you're not going to be intervening more in these women. You're going to give them time so that they can progress naturally on their own. Okay. So this was the concept for the safe prevention of primary cesarean delivery, which was proposed by the American College and the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine. So what they said is, take a diagnosis of active labor at 6 centimeters. Do not diagnose active labor before 6 centimeters. And if you have to diagnose an arrest, then at least she needs to be 6 centimeters dilated. She should have had her membranes ruptured. She should have good contractions with no cervical stage for at least 4 hours. Or if the contractions are not adequate, maybe you might have to give them syntocinon and then wait for at least 6 hours before saying that there is an arrest in progress. Okay, so if you take it literally, say for example, even if she's going to make a 1 centimeter change, then you're going to give her time. So as long as there is a progress, as long as there is a change, then you can give them time. So this is what these guidelines are saying. Obviously, we will have to monitor the mother and the fetus closely. Okay. So basically, this study in AMGO 2018, what did they find? They found by using these guidelines, the cesarean section for arrest of first stage of labor fell by nearly half. Here again, as you can see, their rates of sections are very, very low, but even it made a substantial difference in bringing down section rates. And there was no increase, as I was telling before, in adverse neonatal or maternal outcomes. So for example, let's look at this lady. She's a 26-year-old. She's a BMI of 38. We have induced her, and she somehow got into labor. She's now 4 centimeters dilated. We have ARM'd her. We have epidural. We have re-examined her in 4 hours time, and she's still 4 centimeters dilated. So what would we have done? By the old study, old data, we have ended up sectioning her. But then here, what has happened? We gave her time. 2 hours later, she again was only 5 centimeters dilated. But here again, we cannot diagnose active phase arrest because she's not got into 6 centimeters. Because the material parameters were satisfactory, CTG was fine, we gave her time and see what happened. True to the Zanz partogram, she quickly, progressed to 7 centimeters, and in 2 hours time, she became fully dilated. So Zanz partogram is, giving us, what shall I say, confidence that once she is going to go to 6 centimeters or 7 centimeters, our labor progress generally is very quick. Okay. So that is very, very important to give the women some time. So this is an algorithm which is being proposed. If it's less than 6 centimeters, we do not do much of an intervention. More than 6 centimeters, if there is no cervical change, consider amniotomy, consider oxytocin induction, augmentation. And if she is in progress, then you consider doing a C-section. So this is what I've been telling. So at least 4 hours of adequate contractions, or if inadequate, then at least 6 hours. Okay. So what do you do? General measures, consider giving analgesia, and if there is slow progress, consider amniotomy and syntocinon. Okay. Now, what is this group of women who are being induced? Are they going to be very similar compared to the spontaneous labor women? When Zhang did it, he mainly did it in spontaneous labor patients. But if we look at this study from Harper, when women are being induced, he found that there was even longer time for them to progress from 4 to 10 centimeters. So even if they go into active labor, if it is an induction, their progress is going to be even more slower. Okay, so this is again an important point for us to keep in mind. And of course, induction of labor, as Anna Pfizer was saying, in the past we used to use oxytocin, but now we have gone to cervical ripening agents. But if cervical ripening agents have been used, we have ruptured the membranes and we are giving oxytocin, according to the failed induction guidelines, we need to give at least 24 hours of oxytocin administration. I'm not sure whether this is feasible, but this is what they say if you have to diagnose a failed induction, right? So here again, less than 6 centimeters, we cannot diagnose them as an arrested active phase. Okay. So now what is happening? We have moved from your stone age to the cola age. Now the obesity is increasing, all Uparadarshini's and all that stuff, which is making us all fat. So what is the effect on labor? So this was a good study by Tully. What did he find? He found that if the woman is obese, with an increase in BMI, their time taken to go into active labor is going to be substantially longer. It may not be very significant after they have hit active phase, but till they progress to 6 centimeters, it's going to be more flat. Okay, so if they are obese, if they are being induced, though we are going to use Zhang sputogram, we need to bear in mind that their progress can be even more slower. Okay, so how do we do? I'm not going to elaborate much on the labor management strategies because there's going to be a next talk on that. But an important point which I was telling before is, if the woman is going to start labor at 2 centimeters and we're going to start the Zhang sputogram, as we saw, the 95th centile was very much prolonged. Why? Because it is going to take longer for them to get into active labor. So that is why we want to delay admission in the latent stage as much as possible. Because this study showed, if you're going to admit them earlier, say if you're going to admit them when they are less than 2 centimeters and intervene, the chances of having a C-section is far higher than when women are being admitted when they are in active labor. Okay. And the other important take-home point is, there is no specific upper limit for latent phase duration. And obviously, latent phase duration, you try not to intervene. Okay, so you don't do a routine amniotomy unless you want to correct a slow progress when they are in active labor, or of course as part of induction of labor. And the same goes for oxytocin. As I said before, it is a bane in the boot. So using Zhang sputogram, you put lesser and lesser women on oxytocin compared to if you're going to use a WHO sputogram. Okay, so this is the latest recommendation. Do not have a strict guidelines for the prolonged latent phase. It really doesn't matter. And as long as you are progressing, then you can just wait. And at least 6 centimeters dilatation should have happened before they say they're going into active labor. Okay. So WHO has also come up with some modifications in 2018. Though they have not gone up to 6 centimeters, they have said latent phase is now 5 centimeters. And they also come with categorical recommendation: do not use medical interventions unnecessarily in the latent stage, provided the mother and the fetus are in a reasonably good condition. And what do they say? Here again, this concept of at least 1 centimeter per hour has been taken out. They say even if it's going to be slower than 1 centimeter per hour progress, do not use it as a routine indication. Do not intervene. Do not do a section on them. So this is what the WHO has come up with. Okay. Also for the latent stage, they say, they have also very clearly said, there is no exact cutoff to say that after this latent stage is prolonged, we will have to call it a day or we have to do intervention. And only one point they mentioned, for active stage of labor, though again it can be variable, generally it doesn't extend beyond 12 hours in null-lep and 10 hours in multi-lep. But again, it can be variable, as I said before, if they are obese or if they are being induced. Okay, so now more and more evidence is coming for this Zhang sputogram. This is the latest study which was published in 2020. And this again shows, as we can see, there is no clear inflection point. There is a hyperbolic kind of a pattern, and sort of at around 6 to 7 centimeters, you see that the steady increase in the dilatation rates. An important point is women with epidural, there seems to be a slight increase in the time duration of their progress. As you can see, these dotted lines are without epidural, and with epidural, the labor curve is slightly delayed. Okay, so I think it is important that we use this physiological partograph, which is called as a Niels partograph, for one of the various modifications from this Niels partograph. Of course, we need to keep in mind, we need to diagnose active labor accurately, and our expectations of cervical dilatation should be based upon our population, based upon whether they are obese, whether they are being induced, what is happening. So maybe, in future, like personalized medicine, we might come up with a personalized partograph. It might be the way forward, but it is very, very important for us to remember cervical dilatation, especially early on in active labor, may be slow, but as they become more advanced in active labor, their progress tends to be more quicker. Okay. But again, that's important. These are only thresholds, they are guidelines, but we need to interpret them properly and look at the whole clinical situation and use interventions appropriately. So we have to monitor the mother, we have to monitor the fetus, look at the overall condition, and not just use one parameter to say, I'm going to intervene or I'm going to call it a day. So we have to always look at the whole clinical situation and never one parameter in isolation. But it is important to remember that we have a pragmatic approach, but greater patience, going on till 6 centimeters before we say that they have gone into active labor and before we start doing interventions. So I hope I have made it clear as to what the 6 is the new 4 is. Thank you very much for the opportunity given to me. I hope I haven't overshot the time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Srimati. That was an excellent presentation. And now we know what you meant by the 6 is the new 4. Okay. So I would just like to summarize, though you did that. So she was talking about active management of labor. She traced it from the history, starting with Friedman's 1955, 72, and brought in Philpotts. And then she brought in Zhang, on whom she based her new presentation, this presentation, and it's from its corollaries. Like, so there is, WHO is also coming on board, and there is definitely a shift in the active management, active phase of labor definition. There is a shift. It is 5, 4, it was 3 when I was a postgraduate. It became 4 when I was a junior faculty. It's been 5 now, and we were always thinking it's at 6. Then we all feel once she's got into 6, we know labor, she's going to deliver. We go out and tell the patient party she's going to deliver soon. So that means 6 was the active phase of labor. Yeah. So the alert line, action line, we're not yet ready to give it up. True, because there are decision lines. We need them with us. And so that was a thing. So that's, and the new definition that postgraduates should remember what the arrest or primary dysfunctional labor or arrest in this partogram is. She should be more than 6 centimeter dilated, membranes ruptured, rule that out, good contractions, and for 4 hours she's not had progress. Okay, the thing is how we convince the bystanders, that's another whole new topic, but that's way. It was excellent. And so there is a question for you. Yes, now,
Yes.
Is Zhang partograph used now or the WHO partograph?
Ma'am, unfortunately, Zhang's partogram has not come into work commonly. Even in our unit, we are not using Zhang's partogram. We are still using the WHO partogram, but what we are doing is we are, though if she's going to cross the action line, we still give her time, because we know that, as per the Zhang's partogram, she is still not in active labor, so we give them time. But unfortunately, Zhang's partogram is not being very commonly used across the world.
Correct. So what in essential, we follow the rules set by the RCH. What they want us, the Ministry of Health wants us to put the WHO partograph. All of us are doing it. Sometimes we do it after the delivery. That's another story. But so we're not ready to put. But the essence of the Zhang pantograph, the approach that we would do there, wait for some time, is what we are using here, and this thing. So can you please define the user? I think she came in. Can you please define arrest of dilatation and arrest of descent? Arrest of descent in the second stage. Yeah, you go ahead, please.
I think you told it, isn't it, ma'am? So basically, arrest we diagnose in active phase only when she has reached 6 centimeters dilatation and her membranes are ruptured. She has adequate contractions. If she has adequate contractions, you wait for 4 hours. So 4 hours of no progress with ruptured membranes after 6 centimeters of dilatation, then we take as arrest, or 6 hours of sort of inadequate contractions with ruptured membranes and after 6 centimeters, then we call it as arrest of dilatation. Arrest of descent is the same. Arrest of descent doesn't change. It's like 1 centimeter per hour. So that is the same thing. It's only the arrest of dilatation which is changed.
Usually we take arrest of descent in the second stage of labor. That's when we expect the baby to come down that way. Till then we are just concentrating on the cervix. There was a question earlier which I missed that says, so can we now therefore say that a woman is in active labor when she's 6 centimeters dilated?
Yes, ma'am.
So your answer is yes.
You had also rightly answered, isn't it, ma'am?
Yeah.
We have to wait, and maybe, by the time we finish obstetric practice, they would say, unless the woman comes and delivers, she's not in active labor at all. Maybe that will be that. But as it stands now, it's 6 centimeters.
It's for us, we have these definitions. Then Dr. Veena, is your opinion about using smooth muscle relaxants in slow dilatation of the cervix? Well,
ma'am, we do not use, ma'am. I mean, I'm sure there is a talk on management of first stage of labor, so I don't want to be pinching on that. But as it stands now, if you look at the Cochrane database, they say using smooth muscle relaxants doesn't have a significant effect on the progress of labor. Rather, you might have some adverse effects. So they do not routinely advise use of either balethimate, bromide, or trotovirin. And we do not use it in practice. I've used it in my postgraduate days, but do not use it, not in UK, not here in our practice. I think Pai sir wanted to say something.
Yes, yeah. Dr. Muralidhar Pai.
I wanted to congratulate you. Actually, it was an excellent talk. And, today I have been hearing about this 6 is the new 4 and everything. But today you so beautifully explained. And I had read a little bit, but today you made it so clear to me as well as to all the audience. And as you correctly put it in the end, cervical dilatation is not the only factor to be monitored in the labor. That's what I would like to hit a balance, because some of the questions are, should we use Zhang partogram straight away, or should we use WHO partogram? For those you have answered, I just want to add to what you said that, see, dilatation is one thing. That's not everything. So we have to match the dilatation with the application of cervix to the head. So if the cervix is well applied to the head, that means there is no CPD, there is no problem. It is all going on very smoothly. That's number 1. Number 2, and the most important thing is the fetal heart rate. So it is always to be matched with the fetal heart rate. See, all these problems are, straight away depicted in the variation in the fetal heart rate. Of course, that itself is not easy. There are a lot of interpretation problems there also, because cesarean rates have increased by cardiotocography monitoring also. And then comes another most complicated thing is the amniotomy. There also there is problem, whether the thick meconium, thin meconium, what stage of labor is meconium. So as Srimati correctly put it, it's not just a single factor. It is a multiple factor, and the person behind all these factors, that is the obstetrician, who has to be prudent and take a call based considering everything, so that he won't be the loser ultimately.
Yes, sir. And adding to what Dr. Muralidhar sir said, sometimes the mother also gets exhausted. We want the cervix to dilate. We are waiting, but then mother gets exhausted. And outside the labor room, as Prema Dikuna madam was telling, the attendants will have their own mindset that she has entered the labor room at 2 a.m. Now it is 5. Delivery has not yet happened. Something wrong going on inside. So these are other confounding factors. And Srimati madam, whatever you spoke, to put it in a nutshell, I remember what our professor used to tell about one legendary statement, that a good obstetrician should have masterly inactivity with watchful expectancy. So after one full round, we are coming back to that now. All the while we were taught 1 centimeter per hour. If progress is not there, then reach the action line, go for cesarean. Now again, the new thing has come up. You can still wait, still wait. So the older time obstetricians will be very happy, because they are always for that. Wait, give 1 more hour extra, 1 more hour extra. She will deliver. So that is coming up now. It is very nice to know that.
We still have some comments and questions going on, but the organizers have given you 10:30. We crossed the limit. I don't know about this question. My DGO exam is what should I write? 4 centimeters or 6 centimeters? One question. Just straight away answer. Write 4 centimeters.
6 is the new 4, ma'am.
No. For a DGO exam. Okay.
I think they will understand, isn't it? I mean, Pai sir can comment on it.
No, I will tell you. No, I will tell you. A prudent student should write both the things. See, everybody now understands in life, there is, at least in medicine, 2 plus 2 is never 4. It is 3.9 or 4.1. Okay. Sometimes it is 4 also. So a prudent student should write, see, all these years we have been using a WHO partogram, which said 4 centimeters is the starting point. But there is a new thinking that says 6 centimeters. And this is the logic behind 6 centimeters. So the WHO partogram, WHO has not yet changed the partogram to 6 centimeters. Till such time we can use. So you write everything what Srimati said. And that's a fact also. You are not actually saying, you are not telling any lie. And a good examiner should understand that.
True, sir.
Okay. And for the last comment, which I'll allow, and then we close up, is from Rishika Agarwal. What I feel most problematic part with the new 6 is that they all stop all maternal and fetal monitoring, even when plotting is from 6 centimeters. So it must be clearly understood that this new 6 is just for when you label it for non-progress of labor. And you have to continue monitoring the same as per the original partogram. With that, we will conclude this session. We will know, I know we will be revisiting this as the conference goes on. But thank you so much, Dr. Srimati, and thanks to Dr. Murali for coming in and staying on with this. We will be ready for the next stop. So it is my, so I need to share a CV of the next speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jayashree Nilesh. Yeah, you have the, okay, I can get it. Yeah, okay. I have it here, but I'll think. Dr. Jayashree Nilesh Sali, you're there, and she's from Nashik, Maharashtra. She's an anesthesiologist who's done an MBBS from Sholapur and MD from Miraj, Maharashtra. She's presently associate professor of in the Department of Anesthesia. She has done a fellowship in pain management, and her special areas of interest is good to know, high risk obstetric anesthesia. We would love to have an anesthesia on our team always, and neonatal anesthesia and acute and chronic pain management. She's got publications and she's membership for the anesthesia societies. Okay. Interestingly, she does volunteer work for public awareness programs, and she's conducted seminars for social awareness of the same. And she's been invited as guest faculty. Extracurricular activity, she's in the Cyclist Association, and a cycle from Vienna to Budapest. You did?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So we have now, with all the Fit India fitness movement that's going on, yeah, so maybe we can have another, conference on this too,
yes,
for all of us with this. Yeah. So welcome, and she talks to us painless labor. Our mothers would love to know about it, and we would love to know about it, how we can do it. But you have a question mark. How far is it true?
Yes.
Over to you.
I will just answer all your questions, and your myths will be busted today. Hope you enjoy this session.
Sure.
Dr. Jayashree, you can please
Yeah.
share your slides.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Yep.
Just a moment, please. Can you see my slide?
It's getting shared now, not yet seen.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am, you are in.
You can see?
yeah,
Yeah.
please go
Yes,
ahead.
yes.
Good morning, everyone. I am thankful to the organizing committee for inviting me as a guest speaker. And I hope this topic about labor analgesia will benefit one and all. Let's start with the introduction part. Yes, the delivery of the infant into the arms of a conscious and pain-free mother is one of the most exciting and rewarding moments in medicine. And I would like to elaborate on this in my forthcoming slides. Let's go to a brief history about labor analgesia or painless labor. Historically, the era of obstetric anesthesia began with James Young Simpson, when he administered ether to a woman with a deformed pelvis during childbirth. His concept of etherization of labor was strongly condemned by critics, and the religious debate over the appropriateness of anesthesia for labor continued till 1853, when John Snow administered chloroform to Britain's Queen Victoria during the birth of her eighth child, Prince Leopold. Now, what is the current scenario about labor analgesia? The International Association for the Study of Pain, that is IASP, has declared 2007 and 2008 as the global year against pain in women, which is Real Women, Real Pain. The focus was to study both acute pain and chronic pain in women. And labor pain was found to be a good study model for treating acute pain. According to the 2001 survey, the epidural acceptance is up to 60% in the major maternal centers of the US. That is 60% of the laboring parturients in the US have accepted labor analgesia. The National Health Services maternity statistics of 2005 and 6 in the UK reported that 1/3 of the parturients have chosen labor analgesia or epidural analgesia. However, in our country, the acceptance and the awareness is still lacking. There are few centers that run a comprehensive labor analgesia program. However, the national awareness or acceptance of pain relieving options for women in labor virtually does not exist. Now, why is it important to focus on labor analgesia, or what are the benefits? As you all know, I don't need to elaborate on this. What are the maternal effects of labor pain? First of all, because of uterine contractions, there is exertion, there is hyperventilation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So the effects of labor pain are there is increased maternal oxygen consumption, and because of hyperventilation and hypoventilation in between the contractions, whenever there is hypoventilation in between contractions, there are episodes of hypoxemia. Because of hypoxemia, there is maternal metabolic acidosis. This acidosis leads to vasoconstriction of the uterine arteries. Because of this, there are increased maternal plasma catecholamine levels, there's increased cortisol. All these leads to tachycardia, hypertension, and deleterious cardiovascular effects in the mother. And all these leads to maternal acidosis. This leads to fetal effects like the reduced uteroplacental perfusion, increased risk of fetal hypoxemia, and fetal acidosis. This is because there is a leftward shift in the maternal oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, which causes increased maternal affinity for oxygen, and this reduces the fetal oxygen supply, which may lead to neonatal respiratory depression. So you can now know what are the benefits of labor analgesia, all these deleterious cardiovascular effects in the mother and the respiratory depression in the fetus can be avoided by a painless labor. There are many methods of pain relief in labor. Like there are non-pharmacological methods and pharmacological methods. Now let's go through the non-pharmacological methods. in which there is psychoprophylaxis, there is touch therapy, massage therapy, water bath, hydrotherapy, then transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation, hypnotherapy, and acupuncture. However, the number of women studied has been very small, and there has been no proven scientific data analysis of the quality of pain relief which are offered by these techniques. There is some evidence, however, suggesting that water immersion during the first stage of labor will reduce the use of epidural analgesia. But there is a lack of data for coming to such robust conclusions. Then these are the pharmacological methods. In pharmacological methods, we have two methods. There is the parenteral narcotics and there is the inhalational methods. Now, what is about the parenteral narcotics? In parenteral narcotics, we have an array of opioids like pethidine, butorphanol, fentanyl, then other intravenous anesthetic agents like ketamine and tramadol, which can be used. Let's go one by one through all these drugs. Pethidine. It should not be administered in parturients with cervical dystocia, as there is no benefit and that there is a greater risk of a neonatal adverse outcome. Going to intravenous ketamine. It has been promoted by some clinicians as a sole anesthetic for labor pains. However, it is not safe as the laboring mother will often require an anesthetic dose that may compromise the airway. Thirdly, butorphanol. It is also not frequently used for labor analgesia as it produces greater sedation. Fentanyl has got some effects like it has a rapid onset of action within 2 to 3 minutes after an intravenous dose, with a very short duration of action and with no major metabolites. It makes it superior for labor analgesia. It can be administered in boluses of 25 to 50 microgram every hour or as a continuous infusion of 0.25 microgram per kg per hour. Tramadol, which you all must have been very used to with, it has no clinical significant respiratory depression at the usual doses of 1 to 2 milligram per kg of body weight. The onset of action is within 10 minutes of an intramuscular administration. The duration lasts for only 2 to 3 hours. So tramadol is of benefit. Thirdly, remifentanil. It is one of the most commonest and promising drugs in patients who refuse to accept an epidural analgesia. It can be controlled by the patient, that is patient-controlled analgesia. So remifentanil is an ultra-short-acting synthetic potent opioid. It has a rapid onset of action. It is rapidly metabolized by the plasma and the tissue esterases to an inactive metabolite. The effective analgesia half-life is only 6 minutes, thus allowing effective analgesia for consecutive uterine contractions. It readily crosses the placenta but is metabolized by the fetus extensively. Because of its pharmacokinetic profile, this agent has an advantage over other opioids. So when we go across pethidine, ketamine, butorphanol, fentanyl and tramadol, remifentanil has definitely an edge over all the other opioids, and especially for labor patient-controlled analgesia or PCA. Most studies concluded that maternal monitoring during intravenous PCA with remifentanil should be 1-to-1. Strict monitoring is advised as maternal hypoventilation is common and there are episodes of the saturation falling less than 94% on pulse oximetry. However, it is a potent and a promising solution in women who request labor analgesia when neuraxial techniques are contraindicated. Now, the inhalational methods. What is Entonox? It is administered as a 50-50% mixture of oxygen and nitrous oxide. A systemic review of the use of Entonox in labor concluded that Entonox is certainly not a potent analgesic. Studies suggest beneficial effects on parturients if the method of inhalation is properly followed. Places where neuraxial techniques are not practiced and in parturients with a very short labor, Entonox inhalation is a useful method. So whenever the parturient is not ready for a neuraxial technique or it is a very short labor, then you can definitely go for an Entonox inhalational method. However, the Obstetric Anesthesia Association of UK in 2005 guidelines has stated that Entonox is phased out from the UK in view of the poor analgesic efficacy and the environmental pollution. So after Entonox comes Cevox or sevoflurane with oxygen. In Cevox, there is a patient-controlled inhalation analgesia. Sevoflurane is a volatile inhalation agent which is commonly used during general anesthesia. It has a short onset and offset of action. It appears to be the best suited inhalational agent for labor analgesia and can be administered as patient-controlled inhalation analgesia. Just as we have a patient-controlled intravenous analgesia in the form of remifentanil, similarly, there is a sevoflurane for patient-controlled inhalation analgesia. It is used in the concentration of 0.8% with oxygen, but you need specialized equipments like for maintaining the airway or emergency airway management. Further, there is a concern for environmental pollution, maternal amnesia, and loss of protective airway reflexes. So larger studies are still needed to assess the incidence of maternal compromise. So parenteral and narcotics and inhalational methods in the form of Entonox, sevoflurane, isoflurane, and enflurane still need a larger study to assess whether it will compromise the maternal safety. Now coming to the neuraxial technique or the regional analgesia for labor pain, also called epidural analgesia for labor pain. Epidural analgesia is appropriate at virtually any time of labor when the parturient experiences painful contractions, provided there are no contraindications. It is the central neuraxial analgesia or epidural is the most versatile method and is considered as the standard technique for pain control in obstetrics that is currently available. In the past, epidural analgesia was withheld until the parturient was in the active phase of labor, that is when the cervix was up to 4 to 6 centimeters dilated. However, presently with the use of a low concentration of local anesthetics are used in very dilute and very low concentrations so that they will not cause any motor block. Along with it, opioids are added in small doses. So there is immediate pain relief, there is no motor loss, so the patient can bear down and can start, so we can start the epidural even in the latent phase of labor. The present methods and the drug regimen which is commonly used is first an epidural catheter has to be positioned and its placement should be verified. After the epidural catheter is placed in position, we should start the initial block with bupivacaine in a very small or a very low concentration of 0.125% or ropivacaine as in a 0.125% concentration. Normally for epidurals, the concentration used for other orthopedic surgeries or other surgeries is 0.5%. So you can see how the concentration has been reduced from 0.5% to 0.125%. So this amount of concentration gives only a sensory block and there is no motor blockade. And this is given up to 10 to 15 ml. With this, we have added fentanyl or any opioid in the concentration of 2 milligram per ml. So if we are taking about 10 ml of the local anesthetic, we have to add 20 mics of fentanyl. Now the maintenance of analgesia. Once we have put in the epidural catheter, there is the maintenance has to be done in the form of bolus doses or in the form of infusions. So we can give either boluses or we can give as a continuous infusion. Now there are many recent advances or there are many technical advances which I will shortly brief you about it. The first is the combined spinal epidural anesthesia or analgesia technique in which and a low dose epidural regimes. What is the combined spinal epidural analgesia? With the evolution of needle through needle technique, a combined spinal epidural technique is safely used to provide labor analgesia. It combines the rapid onset because first we give a spinal, we put in the epidural needle, through it the spinal needle is needle through needle technique, spinal needle is inserted. After the spinal needle is inserted in the subarachnoid space, a spinal injection is given with, you have to give opioids intrathecally, that is in the subarachnoid space. After giving the spinal injection of opioids, we can, it provides immediate analgesia. This spinal opioid gives immediate analgesia without producing any motor block. thus producing an ambulatory block. The patient is completely pain-free after the injection of opioid into the intrathecal space, and then then the epidural catheter is activated. After that, the epidural catheter is activated with a very low dose of a mixture of opioid and local anesthetic. Hence, the patient is able to bear down with absolutely no pain. So this is a combined spinal epidural technique, wherein we give a low dose of, to start with, a low dose of opioid is given into the intrathecal space, which is followed by an epidural injection of the local anesthetic, a very low concentration of local anesthetic along with the opioids. Now, the secondly, the low dose epidural regimens, as I'm already telling you, in a very low concentration of in the last decade, the concentration of local anesthetic used to maintain labor epidural analgesia has been decreasing. Like it was 0.125%, but in the last decade, it has reduced from 0.0625 to 0.125%. So such a low concentration of local anesthetic has many advantages in the form of the total dose of local anesthetic used is very less, so there are no side effects such as motor blockade. Now, we can give continuous epidural infusion of this dilute local anesthetic along with the opioid, or we can give a continuous dilute low dose mixture, has been used in the major advance during the last few years. So, to maintain the analgesia after insertion of the epidural catheter, it has been said that giving a continuous and a dilute low dose mixture has been the greatest technological advance during the last few years. The dosage recommended for labor analgesia is 0.0625% bupivacaine with 2 microgram per ml of fentanyl. So for if you are using about 10 to 12 ml of local anesthetic, we can give up to 20 micrograms of fentanyl, and this is infused at a rate of 10 to 12 ml per hour. So this is one continuous infusion technique. Then there is a patient-controlled epidural analgesia, when the patient will demand the dose or the bolus drugs to be given. Then there is another reform in this, in which there is a computer-integrated patient-controlled epidural analgesia. Like there is a preset programming of the computer in which the patient's demand is seen as to when she requires the next top-up, and accordingly the algorithms are set in such a way that the bolus doses are given according at time frame intervals with a lockout and a lock-in time. Now, there are still some myths, like whether there is an increased rate of operative and instrumental delivery. Is your epidural the cause? Cesarean delivery was clearly not associated with epidural analgesia, which showed that there is no direct relationship of epidural and an increased cesarean section. However, use of neuraxial analgesia is known to prolong the duration of labor on an average by 1 hour. However, we are using a very low dose mixture, and the overall incidence of all these undesirable adverse effects has been reduced. In a large randomized trial, which involved 1,054 patients, that is a COMET study, the introduction of a low dose of epidural infusion was associated with a 25% decrease in the instrumental vaginal delivery. So we can emphasize, the Cochrane database systemic trials have emphasized that epidural analgesia has no significant impact on the risk of cesarean section. And the duration of labor is increased, however, by 1 hour, and the low dose of epidural infusion has reduced the instrumental vaginal